Well, we're back at it. Today, I'm missing my host. He's gone. He left. We don't know when he's coming back. No, he's at an investment conference. He'll get back here at some point. But we have what I'd say probably the young guns of the office in today, who I'll introduce shortly. And we have kind of an interesting topic today that's it's on everybody's mind sometimes, whether you're lying in bed at the middle of the night or stressing after you opened your banking app and looked at what your savings are at, or maybe you got a renewal notice for your life insurance, or maybe you're kind of wondering, how much money do I need to have to retire? Today, we're focusing on financial planning. What a buzzword. It's incredible. We hear it everywhere. But before we get too deep, I want to introduce the cast today. So we have Louai Bibi, who is a young rising star in the office, our right-hand man. One would say probably one of the many engines in the office. And so we're happy to have Louai with us today. We also have Michael Lutes, CFP, which stands for Certified Financial Planner, which we will also get into. And then we also have Will Henriksen, who is also a CFP, which, as I said, we'll get into later. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Howdy. It's good to be here.
Yep.
It's nice to have everybody back at it. I think we had another session as a team, and so that worked out pretty well, and we thought, maybe we should do this again. So, we're here. So some of the things, the issues in our industry is jargon. We throw around all these terms: dividends, RRSPs, TFSAs, stocks, equities, bonds, fixed income. What the hell does it all mean? It's so confusing. Well, I'm thinking some of the lads here might be able to kind of shed some light, give us some direction. Some of the things that we also see are titles. And titles are under scrutiny right now by the regulator, and recommendations have been made. So you have things like stockbroker, financial advisor, retirement planner, insurance agent, broker, wealth manager, wealth advisor, money manager. Like, are you kidding me? How are you supposed to keep up with this? So, Louai, what do you think about all the jargon?
Well, we are for sure very guilty as an industry of industry jargon, for sure. TFSAs, RSPs, as Corey said, dividends. I think that, we really got to strip it away and come back to earth. We got to talk to our clients in plain English, and that's the best way to build a relationship, sustain it, make sure that satisfaction is at its peak.
Know your audience, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Mike. I'm allowed to call you Mike, right?
Yeah, Mike.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Whatever
I
you
kind of
like.
jumped gun. I introduced Will as Will, but he might want to go as William. You never know, right? So
We're on Will terms.
we're on Will. Okay, This is good. We'll get some clarity here.
Yeah.
This is good. So, Mike, what's your take on all the jargon? What's your take on all the terms that are thrown around out there?
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the motivation for why we want to do this podcast. I've been in the industry about 10 years now, and when I started, financial planning and financial planner was not used very often. There was a lot of insurance advisor or investment representative or, financial security advisor, and stockbroker was still a term that was kind of thrown around. And over the last decade, financial planning and financial planner has become more and more part of the conversation. And I think people are realizing that all these different kind of subsets, they all can be and are often under the umbrella of financial planning. But still, people don't necessarily, the public doesn't necessarily know what is financial planning. What does that really mean when I hear it on the radio or when I hear it from my advisor? or hear it from a friend. So, that was really the motivation, was how can we just speak at a high level about financial planning and make sure people understand, part of the process that entails, and how it can be valuable, and, who might be a good candidate for it. And, it's right in our name, Ecivda Financial Planning Boutique. So certainly it's important that our audience knows what financial planning is all about.
That was an excellent little pitch there. That was very good. Well, over to you. So, as we kind of do the round table on jargon and what's going on and titles, and so what do you think of the current, title regime change, of having to prove your worth and to, achieve a designation to actually be called a financial advisor? What do you think about all of this?
I think it's great. It's a period in time where people are starting to want to know that they're dealing with someone who has the education, the responsibility to do what's in their best interest. And up until recently, especially like in Ontario, we weren't putting a title of financial planner. It was anybody could call themselves a financial planner. Whereas now, if you don't have that designation, then you're not able to call yourself a planner anymore. So when someone gets advice from a planner, they know that that person has the education, the fiduciary responsibility to actually do what's in their best interest. So I think it's great. Things are moving in the right direction and evolving constantly.
Yeah, the consumer needs to be protected. The clients need to understand who they're dealing with and what they're capable of doing and what they can offer. It'd be the equivalent of going to your mechanic and asking him to check your blood pressure, I would say.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't endorse that type of behavior, guys, just in case wondering.
Yeah, sometimes they think it's cheaper, but it's painful at times. So why would you want to engage in financial planning? I would think that it'd be kind of the equivalent of maybe, if you're building a house, right? How are you going to build the house? You're probably going to need to come up with a plan of how you want to get there. Possibly, or if you're a pilot, maybe if you were looking, you have to probably create a flight plan, right? Or if you're building a business, how are you going to fund the business? How is it going to do all the things that it needs to do? Well, maybe by building a plan and understanding where one wants to go, that might be a fantastic idea to consider. Louis, what do you think about building a financial plan, and who would want to engage in a plan?
So to answer the first question as to why would somebody want to engage in financial planning or build a plan, for me, it's a confidence booster, 1,000%. Our motto is, and I don't know if we've trademarked it, is we plan from right to left. And so we got to start with our goals. And next time we're looking at our bank balance and our RBC app or whatever, the whole point is it's supposed to bring down your blood pressure. So we look at starting from the right. What are our goals? It doesn't need to be just retirement. It's for everybody. It could be about buying a house or a car. And then we look at where we are today, which is on the left, and we figure out how are we going to get there. So for me, it's all about confidence. There's no better feeling than seeing a client who has a financial goal, whether it's retirement or whether it's buying their house. Mike, you and I have done a couple of these recently, and it's so nice to see the relief on that person's face when they know that their goal is attainable, it's within reach. And then who financial planning is for, it's for anybody who wants to pay less tax, who wants to make sure that their legacy goals are taken care of, who wants to plan for retirement. The list goes on and on. It's not just for one subset.
So it might help, lower one's blood pressure, or it might maybe do you think it could potentially help you sleep better at night? I would have to assume in this day and age with interest rates where they are, there's probably some increased stress levels. There's probably some anxiety around percolating inside you about, oh, man, do I have enough money, or what about this, or I want to buy the toy, or I want to go on a vacation, or I want to buy the rental property. How the hell am I going to get there? So, Mike, what do you think about, how would a financial plan help with one's stress and uncertainty?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'll just mention there's this stat out there from FP Canada, so Financial Planning Canada, essentially. They're like the governing body you can think of when it comes to financial planning in our country, and they are the ones who issue the CFP designation and kind of put out the framework for that. So they do a lot of research on financial planning, naturally. And they had a survey. They do this every year, so these are the 2022 stats. And 38% of Canadians say that money is their number one source of stress. So think about that.
38%. Come on, that
38%.
number's got to be too low. Seriously.
No,
I think that number's a bunch of BS. Like, come on. How can it only be 38%?
I mean, maybe
Who
it's
is
number
not-
two. Maybe it's number
It could
two.
Who
be
is
number two.
not
If it's not.
saying that they don't have some stress of money right now? Like, could you imagine if you are a variable rate mortgage holder right now? I'm thinking it's your number one stress in that
Oh
scenario.
gosh, I've got to think so.
I-
Yeah, there may be some other stresses, like we've all got health and wellness, goals that sometimes we're
But
not
we
living up
gotta
to, but
pay for them,
money-
Michael, and there's
money is a big
inflation
one.
now. What the hell does inflation even mean, right? So what is happening? How can we? I have to believe that 38%. I don't know who they surveyed, but I'm going to say it's more like 88%.
Oh, the number of people that feel stressed about money is much higher than that, for sure. Maybe not number one, but it's up there. So a financial plan gives you that, like you said, that flight plan, that roadmap. Like it anchors you in your goals. You come out with a plan of action, and then ultimately the process of financial planning is actually acting on those plans that you've made. And you can have all these ideas, and we kind of float around as humans. I think we float around with a lot of different ideas in our heads, and they change from day to day. But if you have a written, documented financial plan that you've developed with a professional that articulates your values and your goals and starts with your family or your business or a combination of the two, with your vision of the future in mind, and then it incorporates the strategies that we have available to us as Canadians, from tax to investment vehicles to insurance strategies to minimize risk or to plan for estate, and then you follow that plan forward, obviously navigating along the way because life comes at you hard and fast and things will change. But if you've got that, gosh, you're going to be in a much better spot with a lot more confidence when you're making and facing decisions or dealing with variable rate mortgages and higher interest rates. And you give yourself the right plan with enough buffer room, and you're going to be able to deal with these challenges a lot better.
So you're saying if I'm going to die, which we would then probably utilize the term of one's estate.
Yeah, and you are going to die, Corey.
What?
It's going to happen.
Come on.
So it's
Come
not an if.
on.
I
Come
hate to
on.
break it
Don't
to you.
tell
No,
him.
no.
It's
It's
not if.
impossible.
It's
It's
just
impossible.
when.
No, it's not happening. So it's probably guaranteed that I'm going to die. Though there's probably
It's-
two things in this
Probably.
world you could guarantee, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Death and taxes. We
Death
all
and
know it.
taxes.
Yep.
So, Will, so what we're talking about now, so if you are going to die, and why would you care what happens to your money?
Well, if I die, I want to make sure that the people that I do care about are taken care of. That's the number one thing that I want to make sure is addressed. So if I haven't done a plan, if I don't know what's going to happen yet, or I haven't asked myself that question, and it's not a fun question to ask oneself, it's pretty morbid. But we have these kind of conversations every day, and it's often the most valuable one that we have because people can then have that conversation in a space where they know that they're listened to by someone who can help address that kind of question. And if you have that conversation the right way, and it's addressed the way that's going to be essentially addressing your concerns or what you want to have happen should you pass away or when you pass away, then you can leave that conversation and not have to revisit it for a very long time. Or at least not until your advisor, who you're working with, says, well, hey, like this is what the plan was, and we said we were going to revisit this around this time, or when this event happens. And when you do, it's no longer something that you have to go to sleep, and if that question pops into your head, you don't have to feel any concern about, because you know that you've taken care of that question already.
But if I've accumulated wealth, and I know there's going to be some money left over, why do I care? I'm dead.
Well, you can give your money to 3 people, right? You can give it to your loved ones, you can give it to a charity, or you can give it to the government. And if
I don't like that last one. I don't like the last
give
one.
it to the government if you do
very, very bad. Very bad.
They don't spend the way you would like to see, Corey.
I have some issues with it. There's no two ways about it, but we can't get political on this
No.
on this show, right? That'd be very bad.
But you'd probably like to direct that to some place specific
Better.
if you could.
If you could decide.
If you could decide. And you know, what if through financial planning you can?
Food for thought.
Mm.
That's fantastic. That's a great idea. Maybe pay less tax.
Pay less tax.
Pay less tax. So
Give
even
more
so,
to
if
your
you're
family.
going to die, when you die, you're still going to pay tax in that year of death, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Might want to plan for that.
Yeah, and if you don't plan well, it can be a lot more tax than you realize.
Painful. Very, very painful. Very painful. Louis, so if I'm 25 years of age, which I was a very long time ago, and when I think about it, it's quite shocking that I'm still alive. But I'm
you were gonna
here.
live forever.
I'm here. I'm here. I could be
We're
like a
happy you're
cat
here.
with like 9 lives or something like that has gone on in my life. I'm not sure. I think I don't have any left. I think I'm at the end. But Louis, if I was 25 and I was like, I need to save money because I want to go on a vacation or I want to go out, and buy something or partying but like seriously, like I'm going to think about something for like when I'm 65, like isn't that like 100 years away?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great point. And to be clear, a financial plan looks different for everybody. A financial plan for somebody on their last life, if they're a cat, looks very different than somebody who's hasn't even gone through their first life, right? So if you're 25 versus if you're what, 30?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
Mentally, depending on the day.
yeah. So it looks different if you're 25 versus if you're 65. And I know that it's hard to put money away for 30, 40, 50 years. But
What about Lotto 649? Like, is
You-
that a plan?
yeah, I mean, for some, you could put it all in black for sure. But
Put it on black?
Yeah.
Putting on black's a lot better than buying lottery tickets.
Yeah,
that's
no
for sure.
kidding.
Well, somebody figured out how to, manipulate roulette. So
I
that's
heard
out there right
that.
now. So it's, you could follow that. But
Yep. No, you absolutely could. But for me, as a 25-year-old, I'm, I want to protect my loved ones if I'm sick, disabled, if I'm not around anymore. But I'm not too concerned with my 40-year time horizon quite yet. I still put money away for it. Not a whole lot, might I say. But even if you're putting $50 away a month, that's great. But for those short or medium-term goals, like buying a house, buying a car, going on vacation, you still got to plan around it, right? Because otherwise, it's very easy to just put money in your checking account, spend it, because we all got to spend money to make money and live, and then you're left with nothing at the end of the day. So for me, it's about paying yourself first.
But I've seen some charts where somebody that 21, 22 to 25 starts saving like $100 a month, and they have some obscene number at 65 that is just astounding. Like the amount of, like, how does that even happen? Like, is that through compounding, or like, how does it happen that somebody that starts so young needs to put away so little compared to somebody that, say, is in their 40s? Like, what is happening there that, we can kind of touch on for the younger generation to say, maybe skip one restaurant outing a month?
Yeah, so there's compound interest, which is the growth on the growth of your money. And that works in two ways. There's negative compounding. So, for example, your credit card, and there's positive compounding, which are your investments. So it's important to be on the right track of that, or the right side of that pendulum. And so, for example, if you put away $100 a month, let's call it, you get a 5% return. So now you're at $105. And then the next year you earn another 5% on your $105. So that keeps growing. And what is it? The rule of 7, where every is it
Rule of 70.
Rule 72.
72.
Rule
Rule 72.
72.
See, we're a team here, right? So we help each other out when we
That's right.
drop the ball a little bit, right? That's important. You got to have a team.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're depending on the rate of return you're getting, and keep in mind it's compounding, your money might double every 10 years. So that adds up pretty quick. And if we're talking about 10 years, your money's doubling depending on how much you're putting away and how much you're earning. Think about 20, 30, 40 years away. It doesn't take much to get started.
Yeah.
So
Time in the market. And these are, in our world, some of these terms are almost cliche at this point, but for the audience, they may not be. Like, time in the market is way more important than the way you try and time the market, which hopefully you're not doing. And
Wait a second. Let's touch on that.
Yeah.
So are you saying that you should just stay invested?
Yes.
Like,
For a long,
you shouldn't be pulling your
money.
money in and out of your investment account, or even your do-it-yourself trading account. Are you saying that you should stay invested?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna tie in a couple different things here. So, time in the market versus timing the market, as well as tying this back to the financial planning aspect. If you do not operate under the guidance of a financial plan, it's a lot easier to be swayed by the whims of the conversations you have with your friends, or coffee, water cooler talk, or the things you read on the internet and the headline news. And what that causes often is buying high, selling low. Like the trading, trying to trade the market on kind of headline behavior, and then you end up well-intentioned behavior that ends up causing you a lot of pain. So you end up selling when everybody's selling, and then you buy in when everybody's making money, and what you're doing is you're actually creating what's likely a negative return. But if you start even small, as Louis described, and you start as early as you can, like right now, whether you're 45, 35, 25, it doesn't matter. If you get started right now and you put some money away and you just stick to the program, you will be served extremely well when you reach that age of whatever. Doesn't matter the age, but when you want to draw that money out in 20, 30, 40 years.
I thought that I saw a chart on the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the United States. And I saw a long-term chart on that, and it showed me, and I think I've shared it with most, that the S&P 500 generates about a 9% average rate of return over a 10-year period. So the second part of that chart that I looked at was what the average investor's rate of return is in that period. I believe it was around 2.5%. Oof,
Yeah.
that's disgusting. Like, you might as well keep your money in a mattress. So I guess that, what Mike is trying to say is, by staying invested, you're not going to operate from the standpoint of emotions, which I think is a really important item to touch on, because we all as humans seem to make some decisions from an emotional seat.
Absolutely.
A driver. Well, what do you think about emotions and investing?
Shouldn't go together at all. So often, and we just sort of talked about it, people will sell out when markets go down because they're afraid, or they'll buy when things are great because they're excited. And another cliche that goes around our industry is when everybody's afraid, that's when you should be buying in. When everybody's excited, that's when you should be a little bit more cautious.
Who's that guy that said that?
I forget.
Warren Buffett.
That was
Oh,
I thought
wow.
it was the Warner
Louis is
Brothers.
on the ball here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think, so if I recall correctly, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful.
Exact quote.
Makes a lot of sense, but wow, is it ever easier said than done?
And that's why when these things happen and our clients call in, or we call our clients rather, the important thing is we have those conversations. We explain that, and we've already explained that this was going to happen eventually. So when markets go down, people start wanting to sell out and to be fearful, and it's a natural emotional response. That's when we start to have those conversations again and say, hey, like, remember when we started, we talked about how this was going to happen, and that when this happened, that'd be okay because we're invested according to your goals, your plan, your priorities, and like this was expected. It will go back up, and this is what we were planning for. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And in fact, if you want, we can actually take advantage a little bit of this market correction or drop and actually put more money in.
So do you think then, if you're doing some planning, are we considering that there might be some market movement when we're doing planning for somebody to achieve their goals? Is that factored in, that we're thinking, is it going to be just a straight line up the whole way? Well, maybe not up, maybe on a 45-degree angle or so, but straight up would be pretty awesome. But that's called, I think that is a whole other discussion in itself. But so I guess the term that we would hear out there is what, Louis, for the movement that would happen in one's portfolio? What would we be planning for? What would that be called?
Volatility. So that would be, the swings in your portfolio that go up and down. Just like Corey said, the S&P over 10 years did 9%. Well, what that didn't factor in is that in 2022, it was down 20% at some point, right? But then it comes back up, and it's up 8% this year to date, since January 1st. So that's what volatility is.
And then I guess in the jargon terminology that we would hear for the movement of an investment, what would that be called?
Like, are we talking the
Standard
metrics? Like,
deviation,
we're talking
or-
statistics here?
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of if somebody was looking at like their financial facts, if they were looking at, an investment portfolio, would they be like, what that deviation, that movement that happens, the volatility that happens when we're building a plan? Isn't there a metric that's associated with how much movement could happen in there, or what the average is over a period of time?
Well, William just mentioned the statistical measure that comes to mind is standard deviation, but it's risk. Like, that's the risk. When we talk about portfolio risk, we're not talking about the risk of your money going to zero, right? We're not investing in one company where it could go bankrupt tomorrow or next year. That's a very different risk. When we talk about risk, when it comes to financial planning, it's really the risk that you will need to draw your money out to achieve your said goal or to make said purchase or desired income when your portfolio is in a negative position or in even a short-term down position. Like, that's the risk. You don't want to take money out of an investment when it's down, as we just talked about. You don't want to sell at the bottom. You don't want to sell at the bottom or near the bottom out of fear. You also don't want to sell near the bottom out of necessity to spend. So risk, when it comes to financial planning and talking about specifically an investment portfolio, that risk is that you will need the money or want the money when the portfolio is down. So if you have a shorter time horizon, if you're going to buy a house in 2 to 5 years, well, you're probably going to be well served by a different portfolio that's got a different risk profile than if you're looking at a portfolio for 30 years down the line that's for retirement. You can afford big swings in your retirement account that has a 30-year time horizon that you cannot afford in the buy my home account for the next 2 to 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I think that conversation around risk and movement in one's money when it's invested is a really important thing, right? Sometimes people do what maybe the barber told them, or the taxi cab driver, or Uber now. You heard from the bartender that they're buying some, 5 years ago you were buying pot stocks, and maybe now people are throwing around crypto and all these crazy coins that are out there and all these things that people are get rich fast, right? And you probably need to kind of hone that in and say, what is it that I'm trying to do? If I have a very short time horizon, I probably should really lower my risk accordingly, right?
Yeah. And I understand where people come from when they're like, okay, I want to reach this goal in a short amount of time. Well, if you didn't start early enough, you might be way behind the 8 ball, and you might feel you need 100% rate of return in 1 year to get to your goal. That's why financial planning early in the game is really important. You get out ahead of these problems, then you don't need anything but the market or some combination of stocks and bonds, and you can handle, or you can actually achieve your life's goals with very reasonable, I don't want to say, I kind of want to say conservative, but very reasonable and predictable. That's really the term I'm looking for. Reasonable and predictable rates of return expectations.
And then, so from the standpoint of articulating one's goals, would you say that when it comes to planning for really anything, understanding what your goals are and where you want to go is probably the hardest part? Do you think that is what deters people from engaging in a planning experience?
I think it's, I don't think it's that difficult, but it is easily overlooked. I think it's uncomfortable, and maybe that makes it difficult. But when people are kind of faced with the questions of like, why do you want this or that, and they are forced to be a little bit introspective, that can be an uncomfortable conversation, especially when you're working with couples, which is often the case, because you've got two people with two different backgrounds, with two different experiences, two different upbringings, and sometimes they haven't had the conversations as to why they truly want what they want. And there may be a risk or a fear that they are very different. In fact, they probably are.
This could be the smartest thing you've said in your life, like that men and women are different.
I mean, they've written books about it. It's got to be true,
It's
right?
true. It's true.
And so that is a challenge. It's way easier to open an investment statement, look at your starting balance, end balance, and then either be really excited about your advisor or your own investment, selection or the stock market, or be ticked off and blame somebody, than it is to be introspective and look at, well, what are we trying to achieve? And do we have a plan in place to actually meet those goals with predictability? That is a harder exercise, but it doesn't take long for it to be very effective.
Yeah, you would have to, if you were going to build anything or achieve anything, whether it's a weight loss plan or you want to complete a course or you got a renovation, like you have to plan to get from A to B, right? It's pretty important. So what is your number? What is the financial independence number that's out there? The $1 million question. Is it $1 million? Some institutions think that number is a lot higher. So I guess, how do you decide how much money do I need when I'm going to retire? Like it's if I go at 65, like what? I'll be dead at 80. So how much money could I possibly need, right? Like, how, you know, I don't know. What do you guys think? What is the number?
I don't think there's a one size fits all number. And I would say that the biggest variance with clients is how much they spend today and then how much they want to spend in retirement. Because if you're going to spend a lot more in retirement than the person beside you, then you can imagine that this person probably has a much, much higher number. They're going to need more money to spend. You know, it's the retirement number that there was a survey done by BMO, and it was saying that after the survey, most people think they need $1.7 million in 2023 to retire. Well, that number, I think it was in 2020, was 1.4 million. Like that's a pretty decent jump. So there's also the kind of the fear factor there as well, that people don't want to run out of money.
How the hell, for somebody that's middle income, how the hell are they coming up with $1.7 million? How's that happening?
Gentlemen?
I mean, this is what Canadians thought. So how does the average Canadian think that they need 1.7 million? I mean, I guess housing prices have been kind of wild. Maybe that's part of it. Obviously, inflation is a big driver of that difference, especially that Louis mentioned the growth from 1.4 a few years ago to 1.7. So people have a higher expectation.
That's only 300 grand, Mike. Like how did it how did we get to 1.4? Like, if I make $80,000 a year,
Yeah.
and I got kids and I got all that, like, how am I going to pull this off?
Yeah, hopefully start young and start early, I guess. That's how you'd pull it off. But you also, it could be different for you. Like personal finance is personal. So this is a number that's kind of been thrown out as an average that people think, but it could be 1.3, it could be 2.1.
Is it considering, are these numbers considering, any type of, government benefits that are incorporated in that number?
I'm glad that you said that, actually, because I think it's an important conversation, and it's one that people don't think about. Because right now, last I checked, the maximum Canada Pension Plan, CPP, is $1,300 a month, and the maximum old age security is it's a little under 700, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say the combination is 25,000 a year gross, just as a rough number. Can you imagine what that pays out over the next 30 years? Like what the actual future value, lump sum value of those monthly payments are? Like it's massive.
Is it like 500 grand, 400 grand, something like that?
More probably. It's
closer to $1 million, really.
And then don't forget about any sort of indexing or growth, right? Like it's a huge number that I don't think that this is taking into account here. So maybe you need 1.7 million. Maybe your government benefits are already taking care of 750,000.
Yeah,
Or if you have a defined benefit pension plan at work, that takes care of another portion. And that also brings about a question that a lot of people don't necessarily think about too is, well, how much is that really worth? Like if you're going to put a dollar figure on your pension, your work pension, if you have a group pension where it's an RRSP matching program, you'll see a number and you'll understand it. But if you're just growing a defined benefit pension plan, which is sort of like those government benefits, right?
Isn't that like
You won't
cash for
see.
life? Isn't that what they call that? You get cash for life.
Yeah, you can call it cash for life.
Yep.
You'll have different options when you get to retirement, or you may or may not, but you'll be presented some options, and then you might see what the dollar figure is. They might say, hey, do you want this cash for life, or do you want this lump sum amount of money, which we have evaluated your pension at? And that's an amount of money that you won't see necessarily. You might see, but you might not see until that phase of your life.
Yeah,
Which
it's
does
an
get taken.
interesting planning topic for sure. And we live in a city where there are a lot of people floating around with defined benefit pension plans. And although they offer, what's that?
Well, I think there's a few of them outside of this building today.
Yes, there were a number of them on the sidewalk. as we were
Oh,
driving.
yeah. Well, we don't want to get too deep
Yeah.
into that conversation.
But that
It's
so
a pretty big pay raise, though.
but that ability to have income for life and know that it's going to be there no matter how long you live, that is worth something that's very valuable.
So if you saved $500,000, right? If you were able to save $500,000, not including, the CPP and the OAS, like what type of an income could you generate off of 500,000 for life? Like if you retired at 65, like what would you receive each year?
I mean, depends what it's invested in, but 5% yield is like reasonable. So 5% on
25 grand a year.
25 grand. Then add your CPP and OAS. Maybe you're hitting the $50,000 a year threshold there, with a $500,000 retirement portfolio.
And that's if you're trying to keep 500,000. Like you could be drawing more to get to the end of your life and have nothing left.
Well, so you mean it that you could decide that you could increase how much income you want to receive from that investment.
Yeah, flexibility. If you have your own investment versus cash for life, where they're telling you how much you're going to get. If you have your own amount of money, then it's a lot more liquid and in your control of what you want to do in your retirement. You might want to do a lot more spending in your earlier years and not really care as much in the later years.
And I think that's a big thing that we see often when we're meeting with clients is sometimes you'll hear that, it's a large number on a monthly basis that they think they're going to want for income. I'd have to say after my 20 years in the business now that it's quite shocking what happens with people in retirement, right? I see people that they believe that they're going to run pretty hard in the first little while, right? And so we set up our plans to accommodate more income in those years you want to run. You want to go to Florida and California and travel the world and do all those things. And maybe you want to take the whole family on a family trip or a cruise. And so you're gonna spend some bigger nuts per se. But if you plan for it, you can probably make it happen. And the other thing that I see is your spend cycle, the amount that you are spending on a recurring basis starts to dramatically drop once you cross over into your 70s. That seems to be a recurring theme that I see again and again. Maybe it's health, maybe it's just concern of what's going on in the world and you don't want to travel as much and you're challenged and you want to be close to maybe your hospital, your doctor, maybe your family. It just seems that you're spending a lot less money in those years. And so I guess, I'll throw it over to Louis. Like, Louis, what do you see as like an average out there of what someone is spending in retirement?
Not as much as you would think. I'm thinking on the kind of the last few cases that we've done, and it's really like it's no more for a couple, no more than $5,000 or $6,000 a month. So we call it $50,000 a year, $60,000 in today's dollars. It's not a lot. I've seen some cases where clients have said I want to spend $15,000 a month, or they say I want to spend $1,000 a month. But I think it's usually the 5 or 6 a month range. That's pretty average, I would say.
Yeah, I would have to agree. What do you see out there, Mike?
Yeah, in that range. I have a number of clients on the East Coast, and it's a little bit
costs $4 to live there.
Yeah. Although housing prices have
yes they have.
risen
Yes they have.
or cost of living has increased.
Yep.
But yeah, like I guess that you can get by and live comfortably for the maybe average maritimer on 4,000 or 5,000 a month maybe, but usually we're planning for more than that, up in the 5 to 6 range, because we do want a bit of a margin of safety there. We want them to make sure they're comfortable. Here in Ontario, cost of living is a little more, so often it's in that 6 to 7 range. I find young people, as they're projecting out, still working in today's dollars here, like young professionals, I'll see them all the time wanting to be able to spend 7, 8, 9. They even want to know, okay, what could I get to 10 and what would that look like? And the reality is it's all just math. Like we can tell them exactly how much they have to put away on a regular basis to get to any number.
Today's
Just, is it
dollars.
realistic?
What does today's dollars mean? Like
Yeah.
what I don't know what that means.
So it means that today, if you're going to spend $10,000, we know kind of what that's going to buy us. If we think about 30 years from now, if we spending $10,000 is going to buy you a lot less because of inflation, which we're all very aware of these days. And it's going back to that whole, like, you know, your grandfather or grandmother saying, oh, I could go to the corner store and get a pop and a chocolate bar for 25 cents. Well, that was true. Like, now it's $4 or maybe more. So when we often talk about, we're talking about today's dollars because that's relatable. I don't know what $10,000 is going to buy me in 30 years, but I know what $10,000 can buy today. So we're always taking kind of today's dollar value and speaking in those terms, but we're making the calculations to adjust for inflation along the way.
And and Louis, what's that average inflation number? Like what's that number somebody would be thinking about as to, okay, if I put away $100 today, what's that going to be worth, you know, in the future?
Yeah, so we've operated off of the assumption, and we've pulled that right out of the FP Canada Assumption Guide for 2022. We usually operate at a 2.5%, but usually 3% per year margin
For cost of goods and how they're increasing in value, right?
Yeah.
Because right now it's costing you $5 million to buy a liter of milk. Yeah, it's really great. You know, when you see what's going on out there, you feel the pain when you go to the grocery store right now. Like it's just shocking for people to see what it's costing, right? You know, I know in my household, my wife's a pretty good cook. We eat pretty well. I seem to be expanding in all the wrong places. But it's, you know, I'd say like we're closing in on almost $2,000 a month in groceries for a family of 5. We do have two, you know, or 3. We have 2 boys that are teenagers and a girl that's a teenager, and my God, they consume so much food. It's shocking. So no, I get it. So that inflationary number is really important to be considering, I think, is the point that we're trying to get across, right?
And if you want a more like tangible number, going back to the rule of 72, if you have a 3% inflation and you basically take 72 divided by 3, it's roughly 24 years. So in 24 years, that $10,000 is going to be 20. And 24 years later, that 20 is actually going to be 40.
And that's how when you see people that are in their 60s and 70s and they say, "Oh my God, I bought my house for $70,000. How can my house be worth $800,000, $1 million? How can that be possible?" Well, Will just clarified for us, so thank you for that. So I guess, you know, it's people kind of get confused, you know, RSPs versus TFSA. You know, I have an RSP and I have some mutual funds. I have this, I have that. How do people kind of figure out where the hell to put their money? Which vehicle do you decide on?
It depends.
It depends.
The best
Always
answer for
depends.
all questions in financial planning. It depends. You know, there's some simple rules that can apply to some situations. You know, one of the ones that comes up all the time is like TFSA versus RSP. So tax-free savings account or registered retirement savings account. And essentially, the biggest factor is what is your tax rate now and what is your tax rate going to be when you draw the money out?
Because it's supposed to be lower in retirement.
Yeah, with good planning, that's the case most of the time.
So you're going to pay less tax in retirement, right? So that's the whole focus of why you're considering where to be allocating your money, which bucket to put it in, right? Essentially, that's where the conversation's going.
Yeah. Most people are in that situation where they're going to pay tax at a lower rate in retirement. And if that's the case, and that's, you know, it's as if your money that you're looking to invest is for retirement, well, if your tax rate's going to be lower, an RRSP is going to be a great option because you're going to get a tax deduction today at, let's say, a 40 or 45 or 54% tax rate, and then you're going to draw it out in the future at maybe a 35% tax rate or a 30% tax rate. So, take that math, that differential is significant. Not to mention your money's going to grow tax sheltered along the way. With a tax-free savings account, you don't get that tax break up front, or you've already paid tax on the dollars as you earned it. Put money in there, it's going to grow tax sheltered and tax-free, and when you pull it out, you're not going to pay any tax on it. But when you just compare the two from the long term, if you knew it was going to be retirement money, if you know or you're confident your tax rate's going to be lower in retirement, then an RSP is a great option. It's not a great option if you want to have other options along the way. If you're not sure it's just for retirement, then you want to have more flexibility, and a TFSA is a great tool for that.
Even if it's just for retirement too, if you have a defined benefit pension plan and you get to retirement and you have your RSP that you've been building, but you don't have any money in other form of liquidity like a TFSA, and then you start to want to do more activities in your earlier years in retirement, and you start needing access to money. Well, if it's all in an RSP, you're gonna be drawing a lot more income than you might need to in those early years.
And so are you saying that when you pull money out of your RSP that you're going to have more income?
Right. So like Mike was mentioning, the income that when you put money into the RSP, you're at a higher tax rate. You're supposed to be at a higher tax rate than when you draw it out. And that's because when you do draw it out, you add that to your income for the year. So when you put it in, you deduct it from your income, and then when you take it out, you add it back. That's why if you have a lower income and you take money from your RSP, you're adding income to a lower income than when you put it in. So if you have to draw a lot more in those earlier years, you're going to get right back up to the same tax rate you were at when you put the money in, or worst case scenario, you'd go above that. And then you're paying more
That'd be bad.
tax
That'd be real bad.
than what you'd put in.
Very bad.
Very bad.
So that's why having some diversification in investment vehicles like RSP, but also tax-free savings account or non-registered investments if you've maximized both, for example.
Right. So you really do need to be looking at planning in general, even, right down to, what am I doing with my money? What am I doing when I die? Do I have a charity? Do I have a cause I want to leave money to? If I knew that half of all my RSPs were going to disappear after myself and my spouse have passed, do I want to pay attention to that erosion of tax?
Yeah,
It has
it's a
to
big
be
one.
yes. You have to say yes, right? There's no other answer. You can't just say the hell with it and give the money
Yeah.
to the government.
Well,
People
and
work too hard.
And one question that like we might not dive into right now, but that should be at least mentioned is what happens to your defined benefit if you and your spouse pass away? Who gets that money? That would have been paid out for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not
People work.
not a question that people think about enough.
No, definitely.
So
People
there's
work too
there
hard.
could be a catch with the cash for life.
Yeah, there is a catch. Absolutely,
there is a catch, right?
We've worked on some. Of those
Nothing's for
cases
free.
where-
We have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to quantify that value, and yeah, people don't often think about that. That is, if you're an employee of, again, it's usually a government employee, but there are still some other defined benefit pensions out there. You've got to know what that is worth, because when you realize that if you and your spouse, let's say you retire at 65, and let's say you both died at 75. That you took income for 10 years, there's probably an asset value of a couple $1 million that's still there that wouldn't be paid to you, that's then not going to pass on to your kids or a charity of your choice or your grandkids. It's just going to stay in government coffers.
Very bad.
It's very, very bad.
Very, very bad.
That's the technological term. That's like jargon, right?
Very
there.
Just very bad.
jargony.
Very bad, yeah. I really don't like it when a client comes in and I just say to them, your portfolio is very,
Very
very
bad."
bad. Very bad. Don't look. Throw it in the recycle bin now. Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a really good show, and I think listeners will get tremendous value. And, and I think for the people that are listening, if you haven't done planning, if you haven't considered my estate? Is my will up to date? Do I even have a will that you could get done and get guided with somebody named Will? There's so many things that you need to be looking at and considering, and a plan is a live document. It doesn't stale date, right? When you're working with a planning office, with a firm that cares about you, it's going to be brought to the table at every meeting. You're going to want to review, where are we at? Where are we going? Are we on track? Did we deviate? Maybe something happens with life occasionally, right? It seems to punch you in the gut every so often. So the plan might be the tool to help you get where you want to go, even when things go offside. And so I really appreciate everybody taking the time today out of their schedules, and I hope that for the people listening, I hope you gain some insight into the reasons why one would consider creating a plan and implementing it. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.